This is delightful. I'm so glad we came here. Feel those vibrations at Camp Video Games.
Well, hello, campers. Welcome to Camp Video Games. I'm your junior counselor, Sean, and we got junior counselor Josh right here.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing junior about me today. We're talking about Breath of the Wild. We're talking about Zelda, baby. I'm ready to go. I'm a veteran of this realm.
In the school of Zelda, we're no freshmen. I'd say we're seniors.
Absolutely.
Breath of the Wild is just about the best game I've played in the last decade. And it's worthy of a lot of discussion. It's sold around 30 million copies at this time, which that's got to be Nintendo's best-selling game.
Does that stat have, by chance, you didn't get it between U.S. and Japanese, did you?
I think
Sales?
that they're counting total copies sold.
Oh, well. It's what it is.
It is. There's, 30 million people. We got, what?
Well,
8 billion people on the planet right now?
I mean, that's part of the reason I wanted to get the U.S. sales was to wonder just how many people I bumped into in my day-to-day life may have played Breath of the Wild.
If you're listening, you've probably played it, and if not,
right.
You know what? Let's go ahead right out the gate. I'm going to give it a hearty Camp Video Games recommendation. What do you say, Josh?
How do I begin to explain the depth of which I recommend this game? I don't know. I kind of just want to wait till we're into discussing the game itself, and just kind of let my thoughts explain from there why people should play this gosh darn game.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure, again, you probably have if you found your way to this, but it's not just a game, like a well-selling game. It's not just a good game. I put it on a list of important games. It's saved video games in some ways for me.
I would say the most important thing about a good game is its replayability, and the best part of a good story is its retellability. And Breath of the Wild really does both, because it's kind of taking the Zelda formula, which, at that point in 2017, that was 30 years after the original Zelda came out, and they're dang near telling the same story.
Right.
But it's clever in the sense that it's treading familiar territory in extremely innovative and narratively speaking, intriguing ways. But I think let's summarize what Breath of the Wild is about, which is kind of funny considering it's a game people can pour hundreds, if not thousands, of hours into. But it's a very simple story.
This game is at the end of the day, it's about, for me, I'm going to say what it's about for me before we get into what the actual story of this game is.
Yeah, I'd say it's about $60.
Yeah, it was initially $60, but now it's about solitude at the end of the world, and what apocalypse can look like aside from raining hellfire and destruction.
Yeah.
And what surviving that really is. And even within the title, I don't know if I can thread the needle of the metaphor I'm thinking of, but the breath of the wild. So much of the game is about truly being of and in the wilds, and the breath being sort of bringing life back to it. And that is sort of your role as Link, to sort of clear the land of the poisons that have kept life from really coming back after a 100-year calamity that happened, or a calamity that happened 100 years ago.
It's I always thought the Breath of the Wild was just the wind.
Well, you get to ride the wind a lot too. Yeah.
If you want to get a real elevator pitch on what Breath of the Wild is, I'd say it's Link, the hero that you play as. He wakes up from a 100-year coma to find Hyrule is in ruins. Princess Zelda, she's like locked in a psychic battle with Ganon, who is a big pig. And Link, he's got amnesia. He's got to recover his memories.
Gotta love that.
And he's got to, save the princess, defeat Ganon, and kind of bring order to Hyrule.
Right. Yeah.
It's a super basic.
Brings it back to
story.
the story you said has been told for 30 years at that point.
Yeah.
Interesting though that the Triforce is almost entirely removed from this game, which we don't have to get too deep into now. I just figure like if we're talking about how it compares story wise to the original, that's like the one big difference.
Well, that's your quest in the original Legend of Zelda, is to collect the 8 pieces of the Triforce,
Right.
and then you are able to face Ganon, defeat him, save Zelda, bring peace back to Hyrule. It's always, you got to kill the pig. all Ganons are bad.
Dude. Yeah. At the end of the day, all Zelda's are about killing the gosh darn pig.
Kill
at
the
end.
pigs. So the way the game starts it's already like kind of like it rhymes with how all of the other Zelda games start, where Link wakes up. That's even how the ding dang show starts that way.
I'm sorry, I want to go back even before that.
Oh yeah.
That it's one of the most bold title screens I've ever seen. The game, I wish so. Like my game is already like in game, so I think I don't want to wipe out my save by restarting. But I do want to note, like,
you mean the Vista when you leave? The
not even there
resurrection?
yet.
Oh,
very first thing, like,
okay,
I believe
like press
is
start
black
scene?
screen. And like just the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in tiny font.
Oh yeah.
Tiny plain font. And I believe Zelda's voice is chiming over that. The very first thing is Zelda's voice, tiny black font, like just saying like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I think what I love about it is its confidence. Like,
it's earned at this point.
Yeah.
At this point in the Legend of Zelda, I mean, being one of Nintendo's flagship titles, it's confident in all the ways that it's earned that confidence.
Mm-hmm. And we'll probably get into a lot of the influence of especially like Studio Ghibli on this game and its art design. But it's not quite the same, but folks can go listen to my companion podcast, my sister Evangelion and me, and learn about how much I love bold, stark titling, which is a big feature of that series, is the sort of like just plain white on black. Okay, I can move on from that, but I love it so much.
Well, I mean, in reference to like, Miyazaki's work, it's more than just referencing it. It's like paying homage to it.
Right.
Like there's no question that, the big movie that this game has been compared to is Princess Mononoke. I remember when they released the first trailer for the game, it was almost shot for shot a recreation of the opening scene from Princess Mononoke.
Mm-hmm.
Just a hero on horseback, or an antelope, or I think it's an elk in the movie, but fighting a giant monster that's moving very unnaturally. It's a boar in Princess Mononoke, and in this case, it's one of the guardians, just big robot octopus, basically.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's more of a visual thing than worth talking about in detail, but being one of the more popular like feature-length anime movies that like was really popular in its US debut, it was a pretty good choice in terms of like what to ape on in releasing this game, because they knew that there was an audience that loved Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli and specifically Princess Mononoke. So they did their research, but also I think they just gave the team making the game they gave them the free reign to kind of hone in on what it is that this game is trying to capture.
Yeah, and if you can just let me wax poetic and be woo-woo for just like a little longer before we really dive into the game.
This is the place to woo-woo for you.
Yeah, is that both Princess Mononoke and this game, there's almost like a meta magic to it thematically. Be that like thing I was talking about, the breath of the wild, the resurrection of life back to the earth, and there is a theme in the story of the game, which is very loosely told about the this like flower that Princess Zelda is attached to.
The Silent Princess?
It's called the Silent Princess, and bringing it back to land. But anyway, both like Princess Mononoke and this game are these stories of sort of like about harmony with the land and nature itself. And coming out in 2017 is a like interesting, like I said, sort of this meta magic moment of like we're all sort of in this awareness of like, yeah, we're making the planet unlivable and somebody's got to do something about it. And this game is like, it's like such a cozy escape from that anxiety.
Going back on what you said, how this is like, it's a different take on a post-apocalypse. I think in cinema and popular culture, you say post-apocalypse, your brain goes to the desert, goes to sepia tone. But this is, I mean, nature has taken over. Like that's the main aesthetic. Is that like
is reclaimed?
It's green and blue and it's just beautiful and it's completely, it's so beautiful that it almost overshadows the fact that we've got these gorgeous ruins. It means that a civilization was destroyed, but the world keeps turning.
Yeah.
Right. Like
you don't have that same dread that most post-apocalyptic like environments and stories give you. Like I think of the complete opposite extreme of this being like Mad Max. Sure. Right.
People stick with video gaming. This Fallout.
This world's fucking awful. This is terrible to be in. Whereas this, the only thing I can think of comparatively where it's actually sort of a post-apocalyptic story, whereas its direct reference, Princess Mononoke, is sort of about a world that's just starting to lean into industrialization.
It's the beginning of the slippery slope into
yeah,
like the destruction of nature.
But like what this most compares to that I've seen is the HBO series and the book Station 11. Do you know it?
Not familiar.
It's about a pandemic that wipes out people's like most of the population, and it focuses on sort of like Chicago area, Great Lakes area. And thematically, without getting too much into side content, its main, like one of its main themes is that basically like the people who are living healthily in the post-apocalyptic world are basically living under a like sort of communist society, and it's like it's very peaceful and it's very green when they're in their moments of peace. And it's the only thing I've seen that compares to this, where like the post-apocalyptic world, like you actually feel like the serenity and quiet of it.
Well, I think a lot of the times when we talk about the end of civilization or, the apocalypse as it is, people keep referring to it as the end of the world, but really it's just the end of humanity.
Yeah.
And
it's the end of what we know.
Once humans die, like that doesn't mean that trees won't
I hope it
turn
doesn't.
green anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's almost like kind of an extension of like if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, did it make a noise? Except it's like if all the people die, do trees bother growing leaves? Like that seems to be how the human mind rationalizes like the apocalypse. It's really as far as a post-apocalypse goes, it's kind of a comforting, optimistic way of looking at it, where it's like, well, most of the people died, but like, yeah, there's still towns, there's still villages, and like, yeah, commerce is a thing, but it doesn't rule the society. It is just a necessary, there's like life prevails, like Jurassic Park, like life finds a way no matter what, even if a giant pig turns your castle pink. But let's get into the game, how it actually begins once you press start.
Yeah. Well, I can move on from the title screen.
Yeah,
now.
it's a good title screen though. I'm glad you brought that up. you start with a golden light, and you hear Princess Zelda's voice. She's got kind of a British accent, but it's like
Yeah, it's a little weird.
non-committal.
Yeah, because no one else in the world is committed to it in any way that I've noticed.
She says, "Wake up, Link," and then you wake up in a bunch of blue goo. It really reminds me of the Bacta tanks from Empire Strikes Back. When Luke gets attacked by the Wampas, then he takes that blue goo bath.
Yeah, it's I think an even more apropos reference is like waking up in the real world in the Matrix.
Oh,
except
sure.
that's like pink goo.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that seems like a common theme of like, oh, the hero recovers and wakes up a little lost in the tube of goo.
in the amniotic fluid.
Yeah.
Basically, very womb-like.
Yeah.
Cryostasis. It's kind of there's nowhere in the game does it say this is what the shrine does, but it's really like there's so much to infer just out of these very basic set pieces that they're adding in, where it's like, okay, Leek wakes up in the Shrine of Resurrection. It's just this like little cave. It's got his blue goo bathtub, and there's these like, you walk to these doors. There's old, but they're like high technology. It's just very simple, small details that lead to like a bigger picture. Like that, like they're not force feeding you any information, but they're giving you just like free samples all day. It's like Costco.
And the tutorializing, which is probably like maybe the main thing I'll probably want to talk about throughout this episode, is done so elegantly and so brilliantly, because the game I was playing right before this was Elden Ring, which does like nothing. It's just like, here you are, but it hands you too many mechanics, because it's also a quote unquote strand type game where like other people can leave messages for you. So like the first room you're in, you're just like running up to all these like messages people have left, but they don't explain the mechanic to you, and you're like, what? Who? What is this? Like, what is this? What is this message popping up? And like the way this game works is like each of these like first rooms teaches you like one or two things at a time.
Yeah.
like okay, you can run around in here. Oh, look, there's a chest. You can open this chest. Oh, by the way, there's these barrels, and if you run up to them, you don't get a stop everything tutorial screen. You just get like the little A icon, and it says pick up.
Yeah, it's. I think they really streamlined the tutorial aspect of the game in complete in response to how fans really dislike certain aspects of like Ocarina of Time. Where
Skyward Sword.
Oh God, yeah. Well, and even with the Switch remaster, they really streamlined that, so you can skip through a bunch of stuff. But in Ocarina of Time, everyone's least favorite character, Navi, the fairy.
Oh, I don't have my soundboard up.
Hey, listen. You'll hear that every 5 seconds, and it's just like no one turns on a video game to get yelled at. I mean, well, if you do, that's, I don't want to yuck your yum, because I'm sure
it's not kink shame.
Yeah, but most of the time, people like the freedom that video games offer. Right? You enter this world. You're a powerful being who has agency, who has the ability to make decisions and to see the outcomes of those decisions. And, like that's why I am drawn to video games. I like to see the cause and effect. I like to explore a different world that's been put together by really talented artists, and it's like reading a book in 3D. You get to be a character in the book. That's And
on that note, like we'll get into way more detail with like the Great Plateau, but the Great Plateau is almost like equivalent to the first screen of the original Zelda, which they prototyped the game. They prototyped Breath of the Wild in the format of the original Zelda.
The 8-bit style.
Adding in like a lot of its mechanics and stuff. And that was like how they decided, how can we make this open world thing? Which I think is also an important detail, that they didn't just say, hey, everybody's doing open world now, so we should do that. They said, no, this is the natural spirit and heart of this game that we started with 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're revisiting it. We're not just doing this because this is the niche thing that everybody's into right now. But like that first screen of the opening game, it's like you can go up, you can go left, you can go right, or there's a little hole in the wall. You know, like you have simple choices and you go in the hole. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. You walk up to it, and now you have this thing, and it's in this box that says A. And you can just hit A, and you go, oh, I'm poking. That must be my weapon attack. And this game does, like, the exact same thing, but in 3D, like you just said.
Yeah. And it presents simple choices, but a seemingly limitless amount of simple choices that you can make. But the Great Plateau, which is where that's the opening area of the game. It's like geographically, it looks to be like it. I mean, we're recording this before Tears of the Kingdom has come out, and really looking forward to the chance to play that when it finally does. But it seems to be a sky island that's fallen onto Hyrule. At least that's
I'm sorry, a Skyland.
A Skyland.
The first gameplay demo came out this week, and the translator keeps going, there are sky islands, and I in my head just kept going, Skyland.
And which, if you've played Skyward Sword, you'd be familiar with the creation myth of Hyrule and how it started with all these islands floating in the sky. Tears of the Kingdom seems to be embracing that. And this is not going to be a lot of us just
speculating.
Exactly. I think it's more important right now to just focus on what we already have in front of us, and therefore we'll be able to appreciate once the full picture is presented. So one of the first things that you are able to pick up is a pair of pants. Link's.
Yeah. Do you get the Sheikah Slate before or after you get clothes?
Yeah, you get the Sheikah Slate first.
Okay.
That's in the first room. You're still in your... oh man, Link's wearing these like Spanx.
Yeah. He's wearing what, when I was like a high school swimmer, was becoming the rage. We called them jammers.
Okay. Like instead of...
it's like it's longer than like boxer briefs.
Yeah.
Like it's short length, but it's still tight like boxers or like boxer briefs.
Yeah.
And they call them jammers in swimming.
I've been wearing these boxer briefs that like are like mid thigh now. They're like a little bit longer than I'm used to because I get chafed. And it's just actually quite nice. But yeah. So and Link, he's got a hell of a thigh gap. If you want to take some actual observations.
To be fair, he has not been nourished in 100 years.
I mean, he's full of that blue goo, I guess. That's like it's maybe it's just like Gushers, you know, like they like all the juice inside Gusher candy.
Yeah.
He's full of sugar. Yeah. So Link put some capris on, and the vibe, so the capris, if you're not aware, like they're like pants that like come to your like mid calf, and it's the pair of pants that most gamers are going to find as soon as they start the game. Mm-hmm. It was a deliberate choice to, I believe, with Link, the character being based on Peter Pan, aesthetically in a lot of ways and in some narrative styles. He looks like a lost boy, like coming right
in
out
that
the
first
gate.
outfit.
Yeah. Which I think is intentional, kind of reference to the character development.
Which, side note, he's like, this is me just being stupid about like lore and story.
Yeah.
Is we'll find out. I don't know. Just in case somebody's playing along for the first time, I won't say why, but we do find out quickly he's been there 100 years.
Yeah.
We can probably assume those clothes have been there 100 years.
Yeah. They were like...
and are a little musty and smelly. That's all I had to say. I realize I get into spoiler territory if I went too much further about it.
Yeah, I think they're specifically called well-worn trousers. Yeah. And an old shirt. He's got a little fanny pack. Yeah, the Sheikah Slate, it's basically an iPad. Or, I mean, it's a Nintendo Switch. Mm-hmm. Like...
or a Wii U.
Or
which
Wii U.
This
yeah.
I believe it was the last game released on Wii U.
And
in tandem with the launch of Switch and it being the launch title on Switch.
So Link wears this the Sheikah slate like with a band. He's got kind of a bandolier thing, like a belt going across that's holding it on. It's great, and they took the heads-up display and they made it a gameplay function, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I refer to like Fallout 3, where you get a device called a Pip-Boy, and it's basically a big computer that you wear on your wrist, and whenever you want to go into your inventory or you want to look through items or look at the map, like your character will look at their wrist like they're looking at their watch, and then like they
and like GoldenEye.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's a great, like, very simple way to explain everything that you're seeing on the screen while you're playing. Like, if you're playing just like straight out the box Zelda Breath of the Wild, there's going to be all these there's all this information that's going to be presented to your character in the heads-up display. If you decide not to turn it off, it's going to tell you the temperature.
Yeah, which, by the way, I just want to jump in and say, canonical way to play. If you're playing the first time, get in the menu and turn that shit off.
Yeah, turn it off.
Turn off that HUD.
Get rid of the mini-map. Because you're going to end up just watching a dot more than you're going to watch your character and what they're doing. If you're like me, at least. I love turning that off as well. And I did that after you recommended it. Mm-hmm. The most recent replay I did of Breath of the Wild. I turned it off and it made a huge difference.
I find that it has me going back to the slate and the map more often.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the trade-off is totally worth it. To actually get to know and see this beautiful environment that's been designed for you.
So on the doors and in this cave, because we're still in the Shrine of Resurrection, we see the Sheikah's symbol, and it's it looks kind of like, I first think of the Eye of Sauron, but it's like a magnifying glass with teardrops coming off of it, and it's quite iconic, and you're going to see it a lot through this, because it seems any piece of high technology that you find in Hyrule is going to be adorned with Sheikah imagery. Yeah,
and we were introduced to it, I believe, in Ocarina of Time, right?
Well, Impa the character has been around since the beginning. But in Ocarina of Time, I think that's the first time we see the actual
crest itself. Crest. And you get the in that game, you also get the Eye of Truth that is shaped. And,
the lens of truth.
The lens of truth that is shaped and patterned like the Sheikah crest. So it's been established in the lore for a long time that these are the sort of keepers of almost secret knowledge and technology.
Absolutely.
And truth and wisdom. No, I don't know about wisdom, how they line up there, but because that's the whole Triforce thing. But truth, which can, sort of philosophically, as human beings, we can align with knowledge. Anyway.
Yeah. So Link is getting he's hearing voices. Basically, he's hearing Zelda speak to him in his head. Or she's got a great sound system just kind of going wherever Link's going. But she basically is you're the light. You gotta save Hyrule. She says it like that too. She's like, you're the light.
Hey, man.
Sorry, buddy.
Get busy.
And Link is able to exit the cave. And then...
Which one more tutorializing note.
Yeah.
When we exit the cave... Function. We just walk right up to a wall, and he starts climbing.
Yeah, it's great,
and it's the controls and how good it feels borders on sexy.
Oh my
goodness. As soon as you start climbing that wall, especially because I didn't know anything about the game the first time I came into it.
Dope.
I was just this is magic.
Yeah, it's so intuitive, right? Yeah, you can just walk right into the wall, and he'll take hold and start ascending.
Again, no explanation. A stamina bar comes up. Mm-hmm. It starts going down. Your brain intuits right away what's going on.
Link exits the cave, and then you're greeted with that amazing vista of Hyrule. You've seen this.
Dog.
He runs up to the precipice, and then you just get this rolling landscape of Hyrule. Yeah. And it's a direct reference to booklet artwork from the original Zelda. And
I know exactly the picture you're talking about.
yeah, it's great. Like what this game does really well, again, is just take what has already been established and then refine it and repackage it in such a newly iconic way.
And I'll add, like, when I did first played the game, the only thing I knew was like a early demo of it. I don't remember if it was Miyamoto or somebody else playing it, talking about like how big the world is and going back to the basics of like the open worldness of the first one, and him talking about like, yeah, you see that mountain in the distance, you could just go to it. It's not a different zone. It's not like whatever. And that was like mind-boggling. And then having only that as my knowledge of the game and being shown that shot is like, what am I in for? And also the shot was stolen over and over
Every
and over
game did
and
that.
over again.
Even
now
the new Sonic
Frontiers,
yeah.
Pokemon Legends of Arceus, Elden Ring, and then Genshin Impact, which is literally like, I don't. Have you played Genshin Impact?
No.
It's okay. It's Breath of the Wild, and there is some really interesting stuff in it, but it basically like strips it for parts and like strips all the soul and the magic out of it and turns it into like microtransactions and monetization.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's a
Hold on, let me get my
nightmare.
wallet. What this does is tell the player, it's like, hey, like once you hit the ground, you're running, and like we're not stopping you. There's like no like literal gatekeeping here. Like that you can just like if you see it, you can go there. Which is really invigorating from a gameplay standpoint. You get to just like enter a new world. And the closest landmark that you'll see when you leave the cave, it's going to be what veterans of the series would immediately recognize as the Temple of Time. Big cathedral. It's like Gothic architecture. And
There we go.
yeah, it's just this this wonderful, old European style temple that you would assume is just like got so much blood money.
Yeah, I will add again that like the magic moment I had of jumping into this game for the first time. Oh, and we're sitting in front of it, by the way. I forgot to just look over my shoulder and go, oh yeah, that's where we are in the world of camp video games. It's where we're camping out.
Oh yeah, right behind us. Check it out.
But I brought up the in-game shot because of like how it's introduced with that big beautiful shot of the world, and the fact that like also the theme, we haven't begun to talk music and sound, which is another, I'll try to stay away from it too much right now, other than to note that like there's so much good stuff going on in the opening theme, the way it happens with that shot, and like you're setting up right now that you turn around and as a Zelda veteran you go, that's the Temple of Time.
Yeah. If you played Ocarina of Time, that's where you get the Master Sword. That's where you become big boy.
Yeah, and you see it in ruins and this beautiful nature, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah. It's I mean, we are drawn to human architecture. Like, it catches your eye for a specific reason, and they put it there because they want you to go there. They don't tell you to go there, but there's all these very, gentle nudges to if you want to play the game linearly, which is funny considering, if you want to play the game linearly, you could literally just go to the castle and fight Ganon and then win the game. Like that's the goal of so many speedrunners, is like how quickly can you defeat Ganon, and there's all sorts of ways to do it, and that's the best part. There's no one way to do it. The Sheikah Slate, if you're using it in game, it's like a GPS. You can even set destinations that'll show up on your mini map. It's it's great. It takes all this technology and it stays consistent even as you're like navigating the menu. Like Sheikah stuff is blue.
Right.
And like we can get into the color significance a little bit later. But
Yeah, we'll keep holding off on that.
they made some really genius design choices that makes this game just absolutely like above the competition when it comes to like intentionality and just like that like artistic like nuance that is absent from a lot of
into design,
which is absent from a lot of its like contemporaries.
Right. Genshin Impact.
I'll have to play it at some time. I'm feeling a little, when I feel like I've earned it. As you're like, taking in everything that you're looking at, what tends to happen for a lot of people next, and myself as well, you can start collecting stuff. Like the first thing you find is a tree branch. Which
I can't get right now because I'm full of weapons.
You got too many good things, but it's your first weapon.
I have one. So get rid of this piece of trash.
So
you just keep doing your thing. I'm just gonna show the people,
You find an old man who's sitting by a fire. And this is the introduction of your first, what life remains on Hyrule. It's this old man sitting by the fire, and he's not, there never is a character going to be able to just stop you from doing whatever you want to do, as it does in so many games. Like, I again think of like the owl in Ocarina of Time, right? Like, no matter what you're doing, he's going to stop you and talk to you, and you have to go through the conversation until you can like go free. There are moments. There
are frames that you can land on at certain points of the game that will trigger a cutscene that prompts you to go forward, and this is like your first one of those.
Yeah,
really. Beyond that scene where you just saw the vista.
So old man, he's sitting by a fire, and one of my favorite parts about this is just like the subtle changes between how characters react to you based on what you do. It's a very simple idea. Like if you go near a character with like a torch that's lit, they're gonna kind of like shy away. They're gonna be like, "What are you doing?" Or in this case with the old man, you go over to him, and he's got this fire going. There's a couple apples next to the fire. If you grab one of those apples, he'll scold you. He'll be like, "Hey, you don't just take people's food, man." And it's just like, yeah, man, like you don't like. But video games so often just like give you full clearance to just like go around, smash their pots, which Link is known to do.
Yeah. But, other than I think Link's Awakening. I don't know. Have you played it and gone through the thing where you could permanently?
Oh, the shopkeeper?
Yeah.
You can steal items from him, and then he'll like attack you anytime you go in.
Yeah, well, and then for the rest of the game, your name is Thief.
Oh my god, that's great.
It changes whatever name you pick to Thief for the rest of the game.
Not to get on too much of a sidetrack, but one of my favorite games from growing up, Mega Man Legends, which was the first foray into the 3D for the Mega Man series. There's the color of Mega Man's armor will change based on like the morality of your decisions. If you go around kicking animals or kicking soda cans into like stores, your armor will get blacker and blacker. But if you go on and just act, like a good Mega Man, just stay that sweet, sweet blue.
Yeah. Well, I want to add one more thing about the details that you said of like the environment that you were like, oh, you brought a lit flame near me.
Or you're like pointing a bow and arrow at somebody and they're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Yeah, people will cower if you like approach them at certain weapons. And everybody is also on schedules that react to the weather and the time of day.
Starts to rain, people will go seek cover.
Yeah. I don't know how much they've done this other than Majora's Mask, which was based entirely on like learning the schedules of the people in the world, which let's go back to what we started with. This game is just like it refines everything the Zelda series has done that's been sort of like jaw-dropping or a wow factor. That when I first started playing this game, I was like, oh my gosh, are these people just like roaming the map all the time, and I could find them all over the paths? And it was like, it ended up being a little more like smaller than I imagined, but I was able to go back to like that early childhood like abstraction of like, oh my gosh, this world is even more lived in than what I can see in the programming.
Yeah, if you're like me as a kid, you're like, I finally have friends. So you talk to this old man, and you learn that you're on the Great Plateau, which he refers to as the birthplace of Hyrule, which is it's an interesting if you're trying to like make sense of this world building again. What does that mean? And in relation to the Sky Islands that we talked to before, the fact that he's calling this the birthplace of Hyrule even lends more credence to the fact that this was one of those Sky Islands that's fallen down. The old man, he points to the Temple of Time, calls it a ghost of its former self, and Link takes you can take a torch and an axe from the old man. They're like really useful at this point in the game because tree branches, as you'll learn when you start to encounter enemies,
don't last long.
They don't have durability, and this is one of those gameplay elements that I think is often like critiqued heavily by gamers.
Yeah, they shut up. It's brilliant.
They don't. Yeah, people don't like that their toys break.
Yeah,
and in my opinion, it's a great choice. It really makes you prioritize. I mean, you have to ration out the swings on your good items, and it lends to this idea. It's like the same way that like in other games you might save like health potions or save power ups until you really need them, right?
Yeah.
And like it's all leading toward this crescendo. That's what weapon durability adds to this game. It's like, well, I got to save this in case I encounter a bigger enemy. There are certain weapons that you can reforge, or like the Master Sword, which can be repaired in its own way. But with the common items, nothing gold stays, pony boy.
Well, it adds another really interesting, I think, thoughtfulness and quality of development to it that like you sort of have to think in like scaling of difficulty. There's a certain amount of math that goes in of like, okay, they have this weapon, it does this many points of damage, so they could probably survive this kind of thing. So like that's like sort of the base level, but then the durability adds another level of like, okay, it can withstand this much. And in most games it's like maybe you have durability, but you just go to a shop, you pay 10 whatever, and it's like it's not even a factor in like the economy of like managing your resources.
It's more just a chore that needs to be accomplished to get the most out of it. Yeah,
it's like a chore that just distracts from whatever you're doing, most durability in games. But in this, it truly becomes about survivability. And then they have to think as developers to devise the game around it so that like you won't hit walls of difficulty where you go like, oh, I can't get a weapon durable enough to like fight the enemies in this area, et cetera, which is all just to loop back to knock that Elden Ring does not square that circle anywhere near as well as this game does.
You're the only one out of both of us that's played Elden Ring. Is it? I mean, looking at it from a game, like from an outsider perspective, gameplay looks really similar to Breath of the Wild in the sense that you've got a third-person character who can do acrobatic jumps around. You can, swing swords in different ways. It's not just poking, it's not just slashing. It's like a whole variety of movement. But is it just a bunch of boss fights, or are there like normal enemies in Elden Ring? Yeah,
no, there's normal enemies all over the place, and this is like the thing it doesn't accomplish is the way you scale throughout the world. Which, since we're focusing so much on like the opening of this game, the tutorial, the vertical slice of it that teaches you how to play by giving you a piece of everything, is done so well that you rise through the difficulty naturally. Whereas Elden Ring is just like, here's an effing world, and there's not enough signposting about, and here's a comfortable way to grow through it. It's absolutely punishing if you like choose a slightly wrong build for your character, or you like go to the wrong region or whatever. This game is like always going to guide you back very gently without feeling like the heavy hand of developers come in.
Okay. So going back to it, like, you know, this old man plays much the same role as the old man in the cave does in the very first game, where he says, like, he's not telling you what to do, but he's giving you some advice. And, you know, he doesn't outright say it's dangerous to go alone, take this, but, you know, he offers, you know, he's like, share my fire, have some food, and he won't yell at you if you take the axe and the torch. And the axe at this point is the best weapon that you can get. It's we haven't even seen an enemy yet, so what do I know about that?
Right.
But you can either follow the clear path to the like lower entrance of the Temple of Time, or you can explore. Again, it's your choice. You are in charge. No one is holding your hand. Once you approach the Temple of Time, that's when where most players will encounter their first enemy. Which is what, a bokoblin.
Yeah.
There are these
you're going to run into a lot of those boys.
Yeah, the bokoblin are like the standard enemy of the game. They come in different varieties, different levels of difficulty, and they are basically like baby gammons. Like they're like little pig boys. And I don't know what Nintendo has against pork, but like it's pigs are evil. So if you go through the temple ruins, you can fight goblins. So one of my favorite like early discoveries of this game. At this point, I defeated a couple of bokoblins, and I had one of their boko shields, and an archer bokoblin was like throwing arrows at me.
Right.
And I put my shield up. Arrows hit my shield. I put my shield away, and then I just gained arrows. It is such a satisfying, you know, they didn't have to do that. Somebody had that idea and they said yes to a good idea. Like it's just a simple decision, but it is so gratifying.
I'm going to add a side note that I was like in game as you were explaining it, I was trying to navigate somewhere where I could maybe visually display it. And I couldn't because all my shields right now
they're all metal.
In game are metal.
Yeah.
Which is like another layer of craft that and systems that goes into this game that is not on the radar really at the time this game was developed.
Yeah. It's so it's been 6 years since this game came out, which is that's crazy to me that I'm still discovering new things about it. I played it around launch, and I've been picking it up off and on since, and it is just infinitely entertaining. There's always something new to find out about the game, about the characters, about the geography, about like the world that they've like. So they're not building a world in this. They've destroyed it, and that's how you get to see world building is through its destruction, which I think is a really great way to visually tell a story. You could you can design a beautiful Temple of Time, for example, and have it in pristine, just finished construction. Everything is right where it should be. Or you can then punch some holes in the roof, take down a wall, and then you get to see the deconstruction of this like architecture, and that is so much more interesting visually than it's like a story's only interesting if something goes wrong for somebody.
Yeah, and especially because we've seen this world and its history, however many games there's been that have sort of taken place in like core Hyrule at this point. You know, we've been through that 7 or 8 times, and Wind Waker did it as well a little differently with water, which was for me less visually interesting. I remember putting that game down for like months at a time.
Sure.
Because there's a long series. I don't know if you've played it or remember where
you have to find the Triforce pieces.
first you got to find the maps to them.
Oh my god.
Then you have to find the pieces themselves, and I was just like, forget this.
Yeah, those fetch quests.
And it's all just over water to these tiny little islands.
Yeah.
A lot less interesting to live in than this.
When you encounter enemies too, they're not just looking for trouble. Like they are like living. They
they're
have
doing their thing
They have as
sometimes.
much personality as the human character, or as the Hylian characters in this. Like you see them going about the business. That you see them like dancing and partying. You can see them cooking meat. You can see them sleeping. Like you see them hunting animals. It's just like they are characters as well, which it's harder to vilify them at
Right.
that point because they're just monsters doing monster stuff. Like they're not like especially malicious. It seems they just seem to be following their own nature.
Yeah.
Like
Like,
they're living their
here's some boys.
truths. So
I brought up on screen. Like it looks like if you listen to audio only, it's like they're just having a chat.
yeah, they're just chatting. They're just two
minding their own business.
two bokoblins.
And then all of a sudden, Sheboygan.
yeah.
Oh, except I wasn't paying attention either. Anyway.
there's just like they're unlike a lot of video game enemies. They're not just always at war. Like they're like
They're not on just like a straightforward program path of end player life.
So going to the temple, the spot right where you are too. They're projecting a really easy way to dispatch your enemies without directly fighting them. There are these boulders that are right at the top of a cliff. And like you look at them and you're like, oh, I should probably just push that onto the bokoblin.
Think about it.
And
obviously, that's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, and it shows you that combat is not the only way to win.
Yeah, and it introduces you really well to like there are a lot of oh my gosh, I was gonna climb it. That's weird.
Oh, you almost
there's like a lot of physics in this world that's going to behave more naturally than like what you're used to in video game physics. Like it was the first moment for me where I was like, oh, and not only is this world vast, but it's so interactive beyond what I would normally think of. Yeah, bad guys and then pots and maybe some bushes.
Sure. Once you get to the temple, you see that there's this this like idol of a goddess, and it's it's gigantic. She's like 2 stories tall, and that's the creation goddess Hylia, and apparently Zelda is the reincarnation of her in human form, which has no bearing right now on the story, but as you progress, you'll learn more about the importance of that, and how what this game does great is that this like your way of leveling up is going to be through goddess statues. Like you don't just kill a bunch of enemies, get experience points, and then like I'm now stronger. Like you don't really get experience from battle. You get it through these trials that the old man introduces you to. He shortly, because first, once you're at the temple, you see the statue. You can't do anything with it right now, but then you're directed to go to the Sheikah Tower, which is just before it's activated. It's just this kind of like
Is it in the ground? I don't remember.
Yeah, because it like it erupts upward and like disrupts like boulders and does all this, like it changes the topography of the land, and it's obviously the same when like looking at it from the materials that it's made from and like the color scheme, like this is the same stuff as the Shrine of Resurrection. Kind of like letting credence to like, okay, so like whoever kept me in that cave, like they're in charge of stuff. It seems like
Right. Yeah.
at
Well,
this
I'll
point,
cut to
we
the
should say
visual
two.
real quick of just the crest again. Is like that's the same thing you woke up to, and it's like, oh, that's the logo on top of this thing, which
Yeah.
you can't see from this angle. Do you have the spyglass part right away?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you could investigate it that way, right at that point.
So you go to the tower, and you activate it with your Sheikah Slate. The Sheikah Slate seems to be like that's like the key card to interacting with all of the Sheikah technology. You hold your Sheikah Slate up to like a reader, and it, I guess, reads the QR code, and
It does function just like QR codes.
and then the Sheikah Tower, activates, and a big blue like beacon shoots forward, and then you realize this is basically like a guard tower, or a watchtower. And
Either way, you're compelled to climb it.
yeah, of course. I mean, why do I climb the mountain? Because it is
was
there.
there.
Yeah. And that's a philosophy that Breath of the Wild really embraces.
Right.
Like you see this thing, oh, I want to go there. Okay, let's go. So from atop the tower, we can see like so much more of Hyrule. Like you can like get the you've got the bird's eye view. And you'll see once the tower's been activated, all these like orange lights that are glowing across the map. And this is where the importance of color really starts to like make itself known in Hyrule. Now that the tower's been activated, it's blue. That means then like we associate that with. I mean, you woke up in a blue bathtub. The Sheikah Slate, when it touches stuff, if it works, it turns blue. That means a good thing apparently. And yeah, like you're looking at Hyrule from atop this tower, which you climb it kind of like it's like what's this design? Like there's like ladders that are built into like these like platforms, so you like there's no chance that you'd have the stamina to be able to just climb it up from in one angle, just like boop to boop, like
Right.
as you would like a ladder or something. And so you're like kind of like looping around this giant structure as as you're ascending. Have you ever played Shadow of the Colossus?
No, I've had it in my game library on my PS5 since it was offered free maybe 2 years ago at this point, and I never got around to it.
Before Breath of the Wild came out, I would say like Shadow of the Colossus was one of the most like breathtaking, like artistically driven games that like just was so effective at making you feel small when you're looking at things of huge, like colossal magnitudes. Where and gameplay wise, you're this character who was often compared to Link, and you climb giant monsters, like Godzilla-sized monsters, and in order to attack them, kind of like if you're familiar with Attack on Titan, it's like they've got these weak spots. You got to attack this specific weak spot, and even like one person with a sword can take down a mountain-sized monster.
Yeah, which they bring in a little bit into this game with the mini bosses and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And,
we'll get to the divine beasts
Yeah,
too.
well, and the divine beasts, of course. But I want to get back in games, kind of like move into what happens next, because when the slate comes up, I'm pretty sure the old man talks to you one more time, and he mentions those tower we know them as shrines very quickly, but like they're indicated orange before you complete them.
Yeah.
But like you're kind of standing here-ish, and like when you turn around. Again, the tutorializing. If you just start looking around from here, first you're gonna awe, at like the majesty of everything that's around you. But then you quickly will see like, okay, there's one very close to one side, and then if you go and scan over the horizon where you are, there's there's a second one,
off in the distance,
a third one, and then a fourth one.
And they're contrasted from the natural color palette, like because you're looking at nature, but then these like neon orange at this point, if you haven't discovered them, are starkly contrasted from like the softer earth tones.
Yeah, but
I
just want to get like that again, the tutorializing quality that like all four of these introductory like shrines that are going to teach you kind of the rest of the tutorial you need to live in the world they're just beset, like they're hidden enough. Like you still feel like I'm on an adventure finding them, but like if you just scan the horizon from your current vantage point, you go, oh, I go there, 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 and there.
Yeah.
And it almost like in sequence visually.
Before we get past this tower, its gameplay function also serves as that unlocks the map of the region that you're in. When you get to a tower, you climb it, you then unlock it with your Sheikah slate, and it drops some blue goo onto your Sheikah slate, which is
From the Sheikah crest eye.
Yeah, from
it
the eye.
literally
It's
like weeps knowledge into your device.
yeah, but like, and intuitively you know that I've just downloaded some data.
Yeah.
And like that's like it's a weirdly organic way of showing how technology could work in a magical, like realistic setting. And the fact that it's blue goo again, like looks like the same stuff that Link was sleeping in, that he woke up in, and it's only giving you questions that are like the answers are probably not going to be directly told to you, but you can infer. So, yeah, you're looking out of the horizon from this tower. You see all these glowing orange destinations. You know, like, oh, okay, if I go there, something will happen. Like, you know, there's something for me specifically of importance to find there. And yeah, the old man tells you to go find these shrines. They seem to be like entrances to underground. Like they're like the shrines. The shrine trials to me remind me of the Danger Room from the X-Men, where like Professor X's, like, you know, the students, they would do their training in this room that was just like an area where it's almost kind of like the holodeck in Star Trek as well, where it's like you've got all of the same materials being used for very different purposes.
Yeah.
And all the Sheikah technology is being used specifically to challenge Link, who's the only person who is able to access them.
Yeah. And like the room can be sort of shaped by the master for the student to whatever like trial they're trying, or like thing they're trying to teach them, like for lack of a better term.
So yeah, the old man, he like swoops in once you've done what you had to do at the top of the tower. You go back down. At this point, you're just gonna hop from platform to platform to descend, and then the old man swoops in on a paraglider, and
you go, I want one of those.
you go,
bad
oh, I want
boys."
to be able to do, like, now that I like this, and they introduced that in such a smart way, because I just wasted so much time going down this tower, boop, da boop, da boop, da boop, and I'm like, oh, if I had that thing, I could get down so much faster.
Yeah.
And that's really like, so what I'm getting at is by withholding one of the basic gameplay functions, and they show you in, like, you know, in a cutscene what it can do, you immediately know, oh, once I can do that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to the tallest place so that I can go even farther.
Yeah,
It immediately like opens your eyes to like the possibilities.
Yeah, which if I can pick on Genshin Impact one more time,
Go for it.
It also has a glider. And I don't maybe it's just because it's like the second you get into that game, you go, oh, it's Breath of the Wild.
Sure.
Like, I don't remember any of this. Like, I just remember it like just being like, here's all the tools from Breath of the Wild. Go.
You know, they knew there was a market for that.
Yeah.
Like, it was, I mean, Breath of the Wild, wildly successful. Yeah, of course there's going to be copycats. And, like, it'll never compare, you know, it'll never be up to snuff with the original, but they know that there are people who just want to scratch that itch. They just want to do a little bit more, maybe a bit differently.
Yeah, maybe if there's a fan, they can correct me. Like, I think it's one or two things. It's either you just, like, they just hand you a glider, or it's, like, too big of an element of a quest. Like, it's like, here's a main quest line that you need to have, you know, a whole 2-minute cutscene of dialogue and scenario about. I forget, it's one of those two extremes. It's not like this where, like, what you just described. It's the beauty of it is the way it's introduced through subtext and experience.
The old man then he makes reference to Calamity Ganon, which is this pink demonic pig that's flying around Hyrule Castle. It's like violently like aggressive, like spiral, and it just looks like dark evil magic. And again, this is where the color coding again comes in, where blue equals Sheikah equals things have been unlocked. Orange equals Sheikah that has not been unlocked. Purple, pink.
Not good, folks. That's not good.
That's the color of the enemy.
And it's also, I think, like most prominently visible from that point that you're at the top.
Oh
of the
yeah,
tower.
once you're at the tower, you
the
got
first
a very clear view of Hyrule
prominent
Castle.
moment you get of it.
Another part that makes this game's design so incredibly satisfying is that you can basically see the end boss from any point in the game. Like you can just like,
Always
oh,
there.
there he is. Like at some, I mean, like it's you're essentially living in the shadow of the task at hand, and everything you do, isn't directly affected by Ganon, but you know that eventually you're going to have to go fight Ganon.
Right.
Which, keeping Ganon in the back of your mind is a much better idea than having him up in your face all of the time, because then he'll lose his impact, right? Like he's just this like menace that's at a distance.
Yeah. This is a weird comparison to make, but I went back and on the virtual console thing for N64 on Switch. I was like, I wonder how playable Banjo-Kazooie was, because I dumped a bunch of hours into that game as a kid.
Sure.
And I just played like the opening hour or whatever, and unskippable cutscenes that are completely pointless and interruptions just like constant. There's this mole that like tutorializes everything for you, and it's like, he walks you through with this like really slow scrolling text to teach you something that's like, or you could just put an obstacle in front of me and pop like what buttons up to push, which is something I'm glad we're learning in game development.
Well, I mean, the most important thing is that, like, at this point, video games have been commonplace in the household for 40 years.
Yeah.
And, game developers grew up playing video games now. Now, there's nobody that was like, oh, I was into computers, and then I just found myself in the game industry.
Right.
Like, at least I'm sure that that's not as common as people who grew up wanting to develop video games. Like, that's a new passion that our generation was kind of like cursed with.
Not to like knock old designers, but it's just so funny, like little quality of life things we see like that now, that you're like, once we have it, it's like, how did they ever not do it this way? Well, how is it not obvious? But then it's like, so many games still do, like, I'm just especially on tutorializing right now. We'll do this like obnoxious stop you every 5 seconds tutorializing, whereas this game is so like, it's so minimal, but like my 7-year-old nephew is playing this game too right now for the first time. And it's like, he could figure it out. If he's playing with his dad or his mom and they're like, see that button it's telling you to push? Try that. Like, he'll figure it out from there, right?
Sure.
It doesn't need some obnoxious character to interrupt, like the owl, and walk you through the details,
Yeah. So this part of the game does have there are certain steps that need to be taken in order to progress from the Great Plateau. It's the only real distinction that the Great Plateau has from the rest of the map, is that you have to complete the 4 shrines on the Great Plateau. The old man directs you to do this, and he says if you bring him what you found in the shrine, he'll give you his glider.
Does he even say his glider, or does he say like a good present?
I believe he says the glider, because like, yeah.
I'm just gonna trust your notes on details like that. Mine are very just like, I was vibing with this.
Yeah. So for the listeners, I've played through Breath of the Wild 3 times, and I'm in my 4th playthrough right now, and I am just taking a meticulous amount of notes.
Yeah. And I'm all like, and comparatively, this is my 3rd time through. I did want to know earlier, my 2nd time through was to play Master Mode.
Sure.
During the summer of the 2020 pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was like this weird escape into a more serene apocalyptic world than the one I was in. Yeah. But anyway, no, my experience of sort of annotating the game this time through is if you go to Carl's Manager on YouTube, I just occasionally stream part of my playthrough, and I annotate out loud just my thoughts. This is something that I've gotten into in my gaming recently, and I find it's very helpful. But I do not have like So don't trust me on the notes of scenario what happened, because that's more my reflective
Sure.
memory than your written
Well,
notes.
exciting things to come from video game mindset. At
Yeah,
Carl's
video
Manor.
game mindset forever.
So while we're on the Great Plateau, which is the game's tutorial level in the like loosest of terms, we have to go and complete these shrines. You go into the shrine, as we were saying before, there are these underground layers that seem to be designed to intellectually challenge. Oh, I shouldn't say it like that.
What? It does. It challenges your
They're puzzles. They're puzzles.
Yeah.
Like you're faced with a couple of challenges that require the use of in the Great Plateau of the 4 Sheikah abilities, which as we get through it, you get magnesis, cryosis.
bombosis.
Yeah, you get bombs, and then oh gosh, the time one where
Stasis.
Stasis, thank you. Yeah, cryonis, magnesis,
Remote bomb
bombs.
is the word used.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So you go through these little challenges. You use the skills, which are downloaded from these kiosks. The same way that you get map data, you put your Sheikah slate
Or
on this-
software update at the Apple Store.
Exactly. Yeah, you just put your iPhone on the kiosk and it downloads the skills for you. And this is Link in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild doesn't use magic. He uses technology. And I want to say it was C.S. Lewis who said technology is indistinguishable from magic. Or maybe the other way around.
Wow. I was just listening to a podcast talking about it was actually the Resident Art guys.
Oh, cool, yeah.
In their Final Fantasy VI podcast, they went
that's
in
a
depth.
very prescient game to make that point.
One with just the story of that game, and same with the story of this game. But then they connected it to the real world sense of magic, and they talked about it in the sense of Pythagoras and first figuring out how to use triangles.
Sure.
And how if you're a guy at that time who's I don't know, I just put stones together and kind of hope it doesn't collapse, and you find out there's a formula that's correct every effing time
Yeah.
that I can do to support whatever. That's magic.
Yeah.
And this game does it in the same way, where
it's just-
technology is your magic.
And it's indistinguishable. Because
Yeah.
Link is doing magical things, but he's doing it because he's got an iPad.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about what an iPad can do these days. Show that to a caveman.
I would show that to somebody in the year 1998.
I'm sure if you showed a caveman an iPad, he would just immediately go to InfoWars. Here's the part about shrines that I find most intriguing. The end goal of shrines is to reach a monk who is in a stasis of his own self, way. He's mummified, but he's
Right.
alive, it seems. And which is there is precedent of Buddhist monks who meditated for so long that they just mummified. And they still had a pulse, they still had brain activity, but they were in complete hibernation. So in order to what's the word I want to say? I guess in order to interface with the goddess Hylia, and in order to then increase your hearts or your stamina, you need to the monks will give you
You need approval from enough dudes, from enough mummified dudes.
They give you spirit orbs, but let's talk through what actually happens when the monk gives you that
Yeah.
orb.
Yeah, I wish I had an unfinished one that I was right there to
well,
show.
let's just talk through it.
Yeah.
You go to the monk. He congratulates you for completing the trial. He gives you the orb, and then he turns to green magic dust that floats away. His body is gone. It seemingly this monk just like self-immolated
Uh-huh.
to give you his power. Which
Is it
then
the
transferred-
is it the green or blue?
It's green in this case.
Because we'll eventually get to
We'll get to the
sort of
green-
the foundation of green, red, blue beyond what we've said so
Sure.
far. I feel like
it's if you've I mean we can get into it right now.
All right, let's-
the color scheme is based on the three goddesses of Hyrule's creation. So Hylia created the Triforce, but Din, Nehru, and Furore created Hyrule and its people. If you've played Ocarina of Time again, these goddesses like essences were kind of simplified into simple spells that you could use. You could use Din's fire, Nehru's love, and Furore's wind. Furore's wind was kind of the same. It was like a teleportation. I don't remember what Nehru's love did. I never used it when I played through.
I never did either. I
But-
think I'd
and-
occasionally use the fire. You need
Din's
the fire.
fire
to get
was
into
an
one of the
essential one,
temples. Yeah.
in which you would basically like create a radius.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he throws it down and it
Link went
sparks.
Super Saiyan or something. But I feel like you in the game Breath of the Wild, there's more than 100 shrines. I don't have the number,
I think
the
it's
exact
120.
number, but
Don't quote me on it until I double check.
you do it over and over again to the point where it's like, okay, you see a shrine, you're like, oh, good, I'm that much closer to be. Like for me as a player, I put all of my spirit orb toward building my stamina. Where Josh, when you started this game, you went right for hearts.
Yeah,
'Cause
I got trash talked.
I was just baffled. I thought, like, again, and this is the beauty of this type of game where
Yeah.
it's like your way is not the way.
Yeah. Well, mine is also based on exploiting a bug.
Well,
which is
just
whistle
explain that
running.
to me because
Okay.
I tried it and it actually worked, but it was just so simple. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the simplest little cheat to get through the game faster. I do not recommend it if it's your first playthrough. If it is your first playthrough,
Do
like
yourself a favor.
skip the next 30 seconds or so. Like just pretend this doesn't exist. But you kind of gotta. It depends on the controller you have. I have a pro controller, but actually, I'll just do it on screen for a second. If you hold, you're running, and then you start just tapping the B run button and then start whistling. You run faster. That was a really bad example.
No, you did great, buddy.
You run faster than the basic running speed. You can go up steeper cliffs, and the most important part is it does not drain your stamina at all, as long as you're holding down and tapping B.
It's a great exploit.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, if you're a first time player, like it's gonna take you out of the like natural flow of the gameplay mechanics so much that it's really not recommended.
Yeah.
And I while we're talking about like goofy like exploits, because this game's got a lot of exploits that speedrunners just love to find ways to manipulate. The one that I've been doing the most lately that I've been trying to teach myself is a means of fast travel that I believe it's called wind launching, where you use bombs to propel yourself at a high speed, faster than you could just by jumping off of a tall platform. And then you can paraglide, laterally much more quickly. And people use that to speedrun to get to the castle quickly. There's so many different ways to get to them. We'll get to those later once we've done a little bit more just about the building blocks of this game. Because right now we're just being introduced to what's to come. You go through these 4 shrines at the behest of the old man. He kind of like plays it fast and loose too. He's like, he makes it seem like once you do one shrine, he's going to give it to you.
Yeah.
The paraglider. But then he's like,
a
oh,
real
no,
brat about it.
He's like, nah, man, just keep doing it. Like I think it's great too because the game, it's basically the game saying it's like, we're not going to like just give you this breadcrumb trail. Like you gotta do this because you want to do it.
Which brings up the one thing I wanted to say is I don't remember who to originally quote this to other than actionbutton.com Tim Rogers, that I want to say he said a developer told him that like the design of a Zelda puzzle is to be just hard enough to make you feel smart when you solve it,
I recently,
but not ever like impede progress.
it's every time I get stumped playing a Zelda game, I have to remind myself that they do make these games accessible and that
Yeah.
it's going to be simpler than what I think it is.
Yeah, and I think if you made that what I just said more specific, that the sort of target demo like a teenager would feel smart, you know?
Yeah. So the old man basically says, like, if you want to defeat Ganon, you're going to have to get off of this Great Plateau. And you're not getting off this Great Plateau without my paraglider. So just keep doing what I tell you to.
Yeah,
like,
keep
I'm in
hustling,
charge. I'm in charge right now.
Yeah.
Respect your elders.
Daddy's holding the reins for just a little while, just the first 2 or 3 hours.
So I would compare shrines to like Mensa tests where like there's different ways to accomplish it. It's really just about how effective you are at it, how quickly you can adapt to a challenge. It also kind of reminds me of a simulation in the Matrix. It's just it's these rooms, they're so vast. Like, if you look at the geography of some of these shrines, they have like bottomless pits.
They all have, I don't know if all of them do, but most of them do have like some sense of like a bottomless pit and no ceiling.
It's like, it's almost like you've been transported to like the center of Hollow Earth when you go into these shrines. So yeah, Link, by completing the 4 shrines on the Great Plateau, you're able to progress. And that is like easy said, but when you actually get to it, reaching the shrines, while they might be easy to spot from your vantage points, getting to them requires some 3-dimensional thinking. They're challenges in their own right. Like, to get to the like the one atop the mountain, like you got to do some stuff. You can't just like take a trail there.
And it tutorializes in that situation the weather mechanics of the game.
Yes.
Because you'll cross a certain threshold, all of a sudden he starts shivering. You see the temperature drop.
Yes.
And you can either have, this is really great because you can either have, I think, going back to the old man, I don't know how you did it.
You want to talk about how to deal with the actual elements?
I'll just run through it real quick. Is that like, I think the first couple times I played it, I went to the old man and he gives you the warm doublet, which makes it so that you can stay warm. But this time I skipped that and I followed what like to me felt like the canonical route in that like I jumped to that first shrine, got the magnesis. I don't remember what was in what shrine. And then if you kind of just keep going counterclockwise around the plateau, you'll miss the warm doublet the old man can give you for free, and you'll be introduced to those warm peppers and the cooking mechanic for the first time right before you reach the threshold of the cold.
The simplicity yet creativity like that the weather mechanic inspires is a really like satisfying gameplay element. You enter a cold area, Link starts to shiver. Yeah, again, turn off the heads-up display when you're playing because you're gonna have like you're gonna have a thermometer that tells you that shows you the things. Like, turn that off so that you just get the visual cue. You see Link shiver. You see the icy wind going through. So
I wish I could have had that experience because now I'm just like, I know as soon as I cross this, like frame or pixel, I'm going to switch into that mode.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't feel magical once you know the world.
But it does, what it does effectively is makes you consider very basic things like life does. Like, what is the point of life? It's to eat and for a lot of people to reproduce, and for a lot of people is to create art and what is the human experience? It's always
talking about video games and other media.
But what gets in the way of doing the things that we want to do are the simplest things. It's your health. It's the weather.
Yeah.
And I don't, we don't need to talk about the weather because I don't think we're that kind of show. But in Hyrule, there are extremes that can directly like impede your ability to keep going. Now, when we get to this cold area in pursuit of one of the shrines, there are several ways to get around the weather. If you want to get the warm doublet from the old man, all you have to do first you have to read his diary, which I love in video games, where people don't get mad with that. Like he's like, "Oh yeah, I read your diary," and you know,
Yeah.
he's lamenting the fact that he can't remember a recipe that he had to deal with the cold. It's a spicy, spicy meat and spicy meat and seafood. You just got to take a spicy pepper, some meat, and a fish. Throw it on a cooking pot together, and what that'll do is it'll heal you, and you'll have a cold tolerance for a short amount of time based on how many peppers you use. If you give the old man one of these spicy meat and seafoods, he'll give you the warm doublet in exchange. When I first played through this,
I don't not remember that at all.
When I first played through this, obviously I didn't know about that. Like, you know, I was just wrapped up in exploring the world, and I wasn't reading anyone's diary at that point. It's as simple as just holding a torch. You can just walk through the cold with a torch, and that ambient warmth will get you through the cold weather.
Which I don't think I know you can do that now, but I don't think that was even on my radar as an option at the time.
It happened for me. Like, it was like such a. I really can't like understate like how good the like first time playing Breath of the Wild is. You're just like learning so much about like this magical world, and you then realize like how much like the minutia that affects your character in it, and the satisfying myriad ways to overcome them. So for me, you've got this big long trek through the icy plains. I think it's the tundra. And what I did, not knowing any other ways to do, I didn't have the warm doublet. I didn't think to like cook the peppers, because you can't just find peppers, eat peppers. Like that won't give you the cold negating benefit. So I collected a bunch of firewood. I kept a torch lit. I would put the flaming torch, I'm holding it in my hand. You go to the firewood, you light it, you stand next to it, and then like I would take a couple steps, put more fire. It was clanky. It was not graceful, but it was. I was gonna say,
did you sense in the moment like this is not how they want me to do this?
Well, yeah, but that's the satisfying part, right? Where you're like, oh, like I think I'm thinking of something.
It's like F you, Miyamoto and company. I got my own way of doing things.
Yeah, but that's the joy of exploration. That's the joy of experimentation. That's what these games really embrace, is the fact that like, here's your world, and like go at it, like figure it out, do it yourself. Once I realized you could then, like later in the game, you can find elementally imbued weapons. You can find like flame swords. You can find icy spears and of all everything. Like but some of them, when equipped, and even if you're not holding them, they will still emanate heat or cool, and then you can just have them and go about your business.
Yeah.
And certain regions, that's not enough. You can get to a place where it's so hot, even if you're wearing, even if you're like, holding like an icy weapon, it's not enough to negate the heat. Yeah,
there's like, I think like 3 levels of temperature in either direction. Okay. And like, because there's also like 3 stages of cooldown or warmth that you can get through gear or eating recipes. So again, sorry to burst the magic, but like before you've analyzed the game to the degree that I have, though, it does feel like so real. It's so magical.
It's
like,
really great.
Oh gosh, I guess I just didn't cool off or warm up quite enough because I'm so high now. Even though it is like, yeah, there's a threshold of like when you cross this frame, you're in that level of, but it feels very good.
I recently started a game of Skyrim playing in survival mode, and they added those types of environmental effects as well. And I would not say it was perfected in Skyrim, whereas Breath of the Wild really nailed at least without it feeling like a chore. It's just a challenge. It's not a chore to manage the environment. Whereas in Skyrim, like you got to keep eating even if you're not hurt. You got to eat because you have hunger levels. You got to sleep because you've got like fatigue levels.
It's like the closest a game has felt to, like, for me, for real survival that isn't just cumbersome and annoying. Because people have Red Dead Redemption 2, and I understand why, but it's just not for me because the, like, verisimilitude of how slow it is and, like, how your character moves, like, it takes me out of the fun factor that I also want from a video game, which this game nails. Like, I feel like, oh, wow, like, I'm using all these tools and different, like, ideas and tactics to survive the wilds, but I don't feel like, oh, I gotta wait for my guy to lean over, pick up the apple, etc., etc. I love the way it's balanced between those things.
We should circle back to the actual Sheikah Slate abilities and what they do, because we glanced over the fact that he's using technology to seemingly do magic, but what they what's actually accomplished. So you've got Magnesis, where Link can use the Sheikah Slate to magnetically move metal items. And it's done in a way where, like, when you activate the ability, it will show you what magnetic.
I don't think there's anything magnetic around here, but just keep telling the people. I'm trying to show on screen.
It'll show people what can be picked up. Swords, certain chests.
It's like a treasure finding tool, almost as much as it is a moving and interaction tool.
And then you've got Cryonis, where bodies of water can be frozen into these pillars, and the pillars themselves have like a velocity that can move certain items, or you can create platforms for yourself. So, like, one of the first ways that I like crossed Lake Hylia when I first got to it, I would create a Cryonis platform, I jump on it, create two more in front of me, and just hop, and you're just like leapfrogging.
Yeah, I currently use that as a tool for crossing bodies of water. Whatever, man.
It's cool, man.
I don't want to waste the time finding the resources to do this more accurately and faster.
I feel like Mr. Freeze from Batman. Like, it's so cool. And like, the icy platforms, they have like seemingly like runes on them, and it's all aesthetically linked to the Sheikah technology. And like we know just from like these like cues that like the Sheikah have been like ahead of the technological curve for seemingly centuries, to the point where like it's like almost like Star Wars, where it's like this old lived-in world that's got this like wild like future technology. Then we've got Stasis, which can stop objects in motion.
Side note, for those watching the visual version, it's killing me that I'm missing these shooting stars because I'm just demoing things.
That's one of the ways that the game can just like throw you for a side quest. They're like, you'll see a shooting star like land, and you know that there's a valuable material to be had.
Yeah. Sorry, which tool were we talking about? I didn't mean to distract that much
now,
with it.
Which as you go through the game, you can upgrade these abilities. But to start with Stasis, you're able to stop objects in motion, and as a little cream on top, if you've stasised an item and then you strike it, it'll build up a cumulative like velocity in the direction that you're hitting it, which is another
you're doing a good job explaining, because I'm trying to visualize it and I can't find anything. Here we go. Okay, keep going.
It's another speedrunning tactic that people use, where you can stasis an item. You build up its momentum. It's kind of like when in Sonic 2, when you like press down and jump, and Sonic would like charge up his spin ball.
Yeah,
it was a really satisfying function. But people would they would stasis items and then get on top of them, and then they'd be propelled.
I tried to do it.
You got knocked out.
Anyway, I didn't have it on screen.
Yeah, let's keep this friendlier for audio.
Yeah.
So that's stasis, and then the last one is the remote bombs, which in Zelda games historically bombs. I mean, I think bombs are in every single Zelda game. Well, not Adventure of Link, not Link 2. You get a hammer to destroy boulders, but you don't get bombs. But in Zelda 1, which we've talked about kind of intermittently, bombs are a necessary key item to discover areas, to defeat certain enemies. And the biggest problem that Zelda has is the limited quantity of key items.
Mm-hmm. I'm such an item hoarder. I would only use bombs when absolutely necessary up until this game.
But think about playing through the original Legend of Zelda, right? Like you need a bomb in order to access level 8 or 9, Ganon's lair. And it's just kind of like, they tell you that it's on Spectacle Rock and like, sure, like I can find these like weird looking rocks, but then you realize that like bombable walls are everywhere in that game, and you just start experimenting, right? And you're just laying bombs, looking for the next cave. Like in Zelda 1, you can find a heart container. Just gotta lay a bomb at a specific place. You can go in, and then boom, your health is increased permanently. And what I think the greatest decision they made for Breath of the Wild in terms of gameplay is they give you unlimited bombs. Mm-hmm. They're not that effective for combat, but they are invaluable tools for exploration and for experimentation. And again,
and farming.
Link's
the greatest farming tool you have.
Oh, like to get fish,
just like tearing down the environment and fishing.
Well, we'll get to Link's crimes against nature later, because he is apparently he's a notorious fracker.
Yeah, basically, you frack with them a lot
in order to get precious metals. Link fracks. He's just bombing mountainsides.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of collateral damage when you use bombs. You can use a bomb, you can use them in combat, and they'll destroy everything around them. They'll kill the wildlife. You'll knock trees over. You'll destroy, wooden boxes, et cetera, et cetera. Things are not just there to be there. They can be broken. They can be manipulated in so many ways. But having an unlimited amount of bombs, with reason, because there's a recharge time, was a really smart idea in making Zelda a modern game.
It's also a good idea that they give you a square one that will
There's
react differently to the physics of the environment, different than a round one, which you've always had round bombs, but now they roll, which makes for a lot of interesting things where it's you wouldn't have been able to use bombs here if it was only this one shape.
Yeah. Or
you can use them to do something more remotely, more distantly, because you have a round one that can roll or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There are two kinds of bombs that you get with one download, basically.
Yeah.
And they can be used in tandem. They can be used independently. And it just opens up so many possibilities in a rounded gameplay experience. So Link, he's gained these abilities, and by doing so, he's kind of explored the Great Plateau in its totality. There's you get a nice little sampling of Hyrule. It's a micro Hyrule. It's got all of the, you got some water areas, you got some cold areas. I don't think there's any blisteringly hot areas.
Just not heat. Never mind. I'll not spoiler. But heat's the main one that you don't experience.
Yeah. And then, this is a wonderful puzzle. And these types of puzzles are pretty prevalent throughout the game. Once you've unlocked the 4 shrines, you've gotten the spirit orbs from them, the old man tells you to meet him at, if you take all of the shrines and you make an X, you draw an X from the 4 points that you've discovered, that's where you're supposed to meet the old man. It just so happens that is the Temple of Time. He doesn't just say like, okay, once you've done this, meet me at the Temple of Time.
Yeah.
It's one of those puzzles where it's like, it's a very simple puzzle. It's not even really a puzzle. It's just like, it's just logic. You know, it's just a mathematical logic. It's like, oh, well, that's the X. That's the convex point. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. And it's one of
intersection.
those intersection.
Is that a word? That's
yes.
a geography.
Thank you,
I almost said geography. That's a word. That's a math word.
We're all about intersectionality here at Camp Video Games. It's one of those very satisfying. Throughout this game, I find myself feeling like a detective, and I want that to last forever. I just love the feeling of like solving a mystery. We'll get into it later, probably in the next episode, when we start our hunt for memories.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to that next time.
Memories, and I'll probably skip a lot of side quests on this playthrough. There's
so much.
So much.
Well, that's the blessing and curse of modern games is that there's so much.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's but for now all I'll say about them is I think are the most maybe in-depth form of what you're talking about. In terms of like getting clues about, oh, this guy wants you to follow him here, but he's only going to do it at this time of day, and then like
very Majora's
like
Mask there.
Yeah.
Finding memories, finding Deku Koroks, and finding shrines. Those are like the ever-present, compelling, little mysteries to find. Everything has hints, everything has clues, but at the same time, it's not like they're not saying, hey, come here, I have a quest.
Yeah.
You got to start a conversation with someone, and then by and by, they'll get to something a lot of the time, which is great. But on the Great Plateau, the only person that you talk with is the old man. It seems to be completely cut off from the rest of Hyrule, aside from the bokoblins, and I don't think we even fight moblins yet, which are just bigger bokoblins, basically.
No, yeah, that's anyway. Yeah, keep going.
So
even that kind of is part of the tutorializing for me, but that's maybe next time.
There, actually, I'm looking at the map right now. There is another way to get the warm doublet as well. You can if you climb the top of Mount Hylia, which is in like the southwestern region of the Great Plateau. If you get to the very top of the mountain, the old man will meet you there. You
know what? That is actually what happened to me. Is my path's on screen right now.
My gosh, and that's a great gameplay function too. As you're looking at the map through your Sheikah slate, if you press a button, it'll bring up what's called the hero's path.
Yeah,
and it shows you everywhere you've traversed, which is just like if you're trying to play this game, without the heads-up display, without the mini map that's always like looking at you, this is the way to know if you've covered all the ground that you're going for.
And I'll note there is sort of like a tutorializing where like you approach this bridge where it's like that's where it gets cold. There's this waterfall on this bridge, and right before, if you're following kind of the paths, you run into this camp of bokoblins. God dang it, I don't know how to pronounce that word, but these bokoblins, and I died a few times. But once you do, it's like very clear. Here's some peppers. Here is a stone bowl over a fire. And I forget it. It's like the old man is. I think he teaches you how to bake an apple.
Yeah, that's the first dish that you learn is a baked apple. Which I think that's like. I mean, maybe I'm looking way too far into this, but this is the genesis. Of Zelda.
I love it.
We could talk about the cooking. It's almost like the cooking mini game that Zelda Breath of the Wild offers.
It's so good.
Do you think anybody's become a better cook as a result of this video game?
No. There's actually I forget who he was working for, but there's like a video game content creator, Brian David Gilbert, who would do these sort of like very silly in-depth series, probably for Kotaku. And he cooked every recipe from Breath of the Wild. And most of them were completely inedible.
Awesome. So when you're cooking, you can like go into your inventory and you see what items you have that are cookable. And again, there's like you are not given any like real guidance aside from the fact that you learn that one dish can only have one like enhancing property. You can't have a dish that cures, any dish can cure you, but you can't have a dish that makes you resistant to cold and will boost your armor.
Yeah, you can't stack like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's one and done for every dish, and you can only have one of those effects going at a time, which means you can't just buff your character out and like have your attack maxed out, your defense buffed out, and cold and hot are cool with you. But the cooking is it lets you look at the resources around you differently. What I love is that it doesn't force any specific diets on you. You can be completely vegan. You don't have to hunt. You don't have to kill any animals. You can just, the first food you find are mushrooms and apples. And like, that sounds great. Like, have you ever just had mushrooms and apples cooked together? Like a nice saute? It's good.
No.
You dice up the mushroom, but then you slice the apples really thinly and with some onion and some salt and pepper. Mwah. Because apples cook really similarly to potatoes. Which also, if you want to like sweeten up your, you know what? Welcome to Camp Video Games Cooking Corner. Where
go off.
I'll give you some unrequested cooking advice. Treat an apple like a potato next time, and add some sliced apple to your mashed potato recipe and mash it in, and you're gonna get a nice little sweetness, and you don't even need that sweet potato. Make your own sweet potatoes.
If you could help the people a little more, would you recommend a more tart or sweet on the scale?
Well, I think to get a good contrast of flavors, because if you're adding apple to a potato, which is a pretty starchy and seems to accentuate savory more than sweet, adding a sweet then really changes the flavor profile. So I would go for a sweeter, maybe like a Fuji or I just love apples in general. I don't have a specific favorite. I love tart apple. I love Granny Smiths. Golden Delicious are really fantastic, but just make sure it's not too mealy. You want a nice crisp and juicy apple. Although if you do find yourself with an abundance of mealy apples, perhaps the best use of it is to make apple juice. When life gives you mealy apples, make apple juice.
Or feed your goats.
Or give your apple to a horse. So,
yeah, that's the other. That's what I should have said.
We'll get to that next
Horses,
time.
Goats.
Once we leave the Great Plateau, we'll have a lot more to talk about with food, because you can. Oh boy, I just food. So I'm gonna give you a little slice of life here real quick. I was on one of my first dates with my then girlfriend and future wife. I was trying to impress her, and so I was asking like big questions. I was like, "What is most important to you, babe?" And we were waiting for we went to I don't know if you remember this place. They closed down a couple of years ago called Myro's Dionysus.
Oh yeah, Myra's.
And I thought it was the slickest place to take her. I was like, oh, it's this nice indie they do a great mix of Mediterranean.
It was a great first date spot if you're meeting with a boho girl in Southwest Ohio.
Yes, exactly. And so we're waiting on our we probably got a bottle of white wine. I had a pita wrap and some nice salads, and trying to eat healthy, impress her, make her think that's how I always eat. And so I'm like, babe, what's most important to you? And it was a late lunch, and without skipping a beat, she was like, food. And I was like,
that's it right there.
And
that's love, baby.
She was like, why? What's it for you? And I was like, communication.
You liar! It's food, damn it.
But what that did was teach me that I need to learn how to cook. And at that point I knew how to I could boil some rice. I could throw in I could throw some frozen fish in the oven and hope for the best. But I really started to value cooking, and Breath of the Wild kind of is one of the first video games that I played outside of Skyrim again, which has a great cooking function too, but it's just not as visually satisfying. The art style of Breath of the Wild makes food look so good. Like even just like an apple, it's just got this curvature. It's this cell shading mixed with the whatever the other graphical style that they're like, because they're combining cell shading, like the cell shading style of Wind Waker with a more realistic.
It's actually, I think it's like almost like it's actually like a cell shaded filter over a standard like
for
3D
sure.
modeling in whatever like I don't know, don't quote, I don't know this stuff as well, but like Unreal Engine or whatever, you know, that they used as the engine. Or
There's a
filter.
great
I don't know.
video on YouTube that I saw of like they took the cell shading filter off.
It's not the same.
And it's just like, it's like, oh, okay. Like Wind Waker got a lot of flack for its cell shading. People thought it made the game look too childish.
Yeah.
And like as an adult who loves cartoons and like like bright, you know, solid primary colors and that kind of thing, I just found it very, very satisfying.
We are way too late in this episode for me to get into like kind of like the history of 3D and how I feel like Wind Waker was such a bold choice that was like objectively correct. Of like, no, actually, guys, this is what you want.
It changed the aesthetic trajectory of Zelda.
I could get into that for a while, but
we'll save that maybe for the Patreon. But long story short, food is one of those gameplay functions that you can completely ignore and still have a great gameplay experience. Or you can, like, there's side quests to find royal dishes later in the game that require like rarer ingredients. And it's there if you want it. Like every other aspect of this game, it's there if you want to use it. And you can ignore it as well and still have a very full experience. So we briefly mentioned the Koroks, which are these little, speaking back on like Princess Mononoke, they're like the spirits of the forest.
One of the most direct,
They even have the same like soundscape, like the weird maraca sound. The creepy, very creepy, but also very lovable.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to like spread out my commentary on the sound and music in this game.
Yeah,
but
because so far in this game, what we've had a couple of great little like heroic like passages go through, but then mostly it's very minimalistic. There's some like tinkering on the piano. And nothing too orchestral,
which is just a incredible choice. Incredibly perfect choice. These baby children on the internet who say, well, Breath of the Wild has no music in it. Oh my God, you couldn't be more wrong about anything in your life. Keep listening, keep subscribing, but you're so dead wrong.
You know, what it does then is it's so naturalistic and it integrates itself so well into the game that you can almost forget it's there.
Yeah.
It's like a well-designed like room where it's like, oh, I didn't even realize that like things were done this way intentionally. It just all matches so well together.
It creates a really nice liminal space. No, it does exactly what it needs to do in that it usually when you feel like, oh, there's no music, there's something that's so well integrated into the environment that its job is to reinforce what you're experiencing in the wilds, not to be. Its job is to not be noticed.
Yeah. It's it's the exact opposite approach from. I mean, 'cause if you want to look at this as the other side of the mirror of the original Legend of Zelda, where they've got the overworld theme that's just playing constantly unless you're in a dungeon. It's like in like this one. I mean, you do hear that passage, but not for a while. And in a very different like context. The minimalism of the soundscape matches kind of the like civilization, like who's making the music, a lot of the times too, as we go through the game, you'll realize that some music is coming from specific places and you can hear it as like the Rito that plays the accordion. I don't remember his name right now. He's a wonderful
he'll
design.
pop up
He's playing
later.
some like gypsy jazz too. It's a really fascinating. I think he's But what you get is instead like these are all facets of the experience. You're not being told how to feel by music at every moment. The music picks up when you're in combat, and it crescendos alongside the combat because it's been integrated so well into the actual combat mechanics. Like you can finish the music by finishing the fight, and it doesn't sound like it's being cut off or like you're like pressing pause. It all ends very naturally. So at this point, we meet the Koroks. They are like spirits of the forest that are little puzzles in themselves. Like to find a Korok is like to stumble upon like a fairy in, you know.
It's the puzzle is always it's always related to the environment. There are those ones where you have to like shoot a balloon of them.
Oh yeah, I really dislike those.
But you still like have to interact with a object in the natural world to like trigger that little puzzle. All of the puzzles are related to the natural world.
They tend to find these little like okay, in the natural world we really rarely ever see patterns or like 90-degree angles or these like little visual cues. There's visual cues in the wild that says
something's off.
Like there's two rocks, but there's like a rock-sized vacancy between these two rocks. And oh my god, there's a rock right up the hill. I bet if I moved that rock in between those other two rocks, something will happen. And it's like it's a reward. It's like almost it's like or where you give apples, right? You know, there's these like little like statues that have little plates in front of them, and there's one that doesn't have an apple in it. If you put the apple in there, the Korok shows and then gives you a Deku seed, or is it Korok seed?
Korok seeds.
And those are going to be used later to increase your inventory. But for a lot of players, they are just like it's a huge piece of the completionist puzzle where you have to find, I believe, in excess of like 900,
something like that.
And to do so means you have to look at every square inch of the map. You'll find these little, anachronistic.
There are exactly 900, by the way.
There's 900.
Yeah.
Isn't that just like in a normal gaming session, you'll probably naturally come across like a couple of them just playing. You'll be like, oh, there's like this one needs a magnesis. I just need to put this metal block into this like vacant hole. That's it's there, and it's pretty obvious. Other ones are really satisfying, but we're really not going to focus on them too much because that is, if I were to put it in like my assessment is that they're kind of like gameplay filler, and they're there for the completionists, of which I am not one.
Yeah, definitely not.
But they do have a function that really does benefit your character if you decide to spend time in it.
Yeah, and it'll naturally, what you're saying, you'll naturally come across them in a fashion that you'll be pretty well difficulty matched towards end game, by just naturally following the path of what shows up. And if you're just somewhat observant to like, nature's just a little too organized.
Same goes with shrines too. Where like you do not need to find every shrine. The ones that'll present themselves obviously enough will probably give you the boost that you need in order to have a pretty rounded gameplay experience. Yeah. But they're not necessary, but they're there if you want them to be. Again, it's just like you've got this big sandbox and you don't have to play with all the toys, but you can.
Yeah. And we're running hell along on this opening episode.
Well,
so we should fast forward to what's left of the Great Plateau that we haven't covered here.
Once you meet the old man back at the Temple of Time, he reveals himself to be the ghost of the King of Hyrule.
King Rome. Roam.
I thought I had his name written down.
That's it. It's King Rom.
But he's got like a King Bosphorus.
Oh, you've got the whole name.
Huh?
You got the whole name. See, yeah. I gotta just trust your detailed note taking.
If you didn't know, I worked as a a reporter and as a critic for the newspaper for a long time. So my note taking is more just like habitual and reflexive.
Can't stop.
And you really can't turn that part of your brain off. But I decided it's better to just use those talents for camp video games. Yeah, once the king reveals himself, which is it's a mystery you didn't know was a mystery. Mm-hmm. Like the way that this game plays, just like, oh, and here's a ghost, and he's Zelda's dad. Which is like weird, especially if he's like yelled at you for like doing all this stuff. Like I just felt so bad. I was like, oh man, the king knows that I steal apples.
And we like even when he reveals himself,
it's so dramatic.
It's so dramatic, but
and green too
as the character, because we have amnesia. We don't have as a context for why this is a big deal. Mm-hmm. So I'll let you kind of get into the reveals and stuff from there.
Well, what I like again is that with ghosts, the green color is associated, mm-hmm. and that's consistent with how the monks, when they disapparate, they go into a green mist, as it is. The ghost of the king has this green aura about him, which is distinct yet in the same like palette as the orange, the blue, and the pink of the Sheikah and of Calamity Ganon. And so that we've got this like great like palette that's like not naturally occurring colors, and they're like neon scents, and you start to like make these associations where like, okay, well, like, blue is Sheikah, that's good. Orange is Sheikah, it needs to turn blue in order for it to be good. Mm-hmm. Pink seems to be bad. It's a big pig. I don't like pink. And green seems to have this like almost like neither good nor evil. It's just like the natural spirit world in its like color essence.
Yeah. So the natural color of nature is also like the natural color of the spirit realm, like you're saying. And also, not that it's like relevant or that they were pulling from the exact same like pool, but like Lifestream in Final Fantasy VII does the same thing. It's always this green flowing thing, which I think is just like a natural tendency of like, oh, life, essence, nature. What is the most common color? Green. Look around us.
Yeah. Green is the color of nature.
That's what makes this camp video game mindset game.
When the king reveals himself to be a ghost, and that he's the king, it's like from a first time experience, it just blew my mind. I was like, I felt elated to have this like kind of like real big shift in the narrative. Like everything was kind of like hunky dory, like nothing real, no big like corners. You're just slowly progressing. You got a couple of small things to do, and then like, bam! I'm not a human. I'm a ghost, and I'm the king, and that's my daughter in the castle, and you need to go save her.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can do it is with this paraglider that I'm giving you. And this is the last point that I want to make about the Great Plateau, is that they withheld the paraglider until this point, and then you're able to enter Hyrule proper with the aid of the paraglider. Because I don't know if you tried the first time you played.
I forget what happens.
Just climb. It's it'll cancel you out at some point. Like I tried for a little bit, and I realized quickly that if they don't want me to do it, they're going to make sure I can't do it.
Yeah. And it's funny because you could get into your head of like, oh, they promised me this big magic game where I can go anywhere, and no, there's like these walls up.
Yeah. But it's such a rare like kind of like vetting that the game does, where you don't have to do that all the time, and like you're not going to feel that way again, really, in the sense that like, oh, I've got to do all this and this and this before I can really get into it. Like once this happens, once you're given the paraglider, that is when the game is like when Hyrule becomes literally accessible, and you can then like you're not just seeing it from high above. You're then like, oh boy, I get to go down there now.
Yeah.
And at the recommendation of the king, he tells you to seek out Impa in Kakariko Village. And those two names, Impa, Kakariko Village, those are like long associated with the series.
Yeah. I'm in Zelda now, baby.
Oh yeah. And that's where you start if you're going to follow the game as it sort of recommends, because it, again, open world, you can do whatever you want, but it definitely has a path that is recommended.
Yeah.
And we're going to follow that as we go along through this. We're going to focus on a region by region. And next up is West Necluda, which is when you leave the Great Plateau, it's the easiest place to access. It's kind of just, again, like all of the other landmarks that you seem to find yourself through. It's just like kind of like the path of least resistance to get there.
Yeah, which I want to talk about a little bit, like as maybe the last thing on the Great Plateau. Does he give you the paraglider at the top of the tower?
Yeah. So you can then just you're at the top of Temple of Time, and you're at the top of the Temple of Time, not one of the Sheikah towers.
Okay.
The Temple of Time, where he reveals himself, and then like you just, because again you have to traverse this tower. There some people, I remember people complaining about how hard it is to get to the top, but like there's literally a ladder if you just like spend the extra like seconds.
It's like a very minor puzzle.
And it's fun.
Okay, you've used this climbing skill a little bit, but how far can you push it?
Yeah.
Or like it kind of teaches you a little more about the types of surfaces you can just like interact with and climb.
Yeah. And I'd say the first time I played through, I was so excited to get the paraglider that I didn't even bother to go to the Hylia statue to like cash in my spirit orbs.
Oh, I don't think I did either.
And so I remember thinking that, oh shoot, I have to go back to the Temple of Time to do this, but that's not the case. So you're going to be able to find shrines to Hylia throughout Hyrule. Any civilization that you come across, or like settlement, is typically going to have one somewhere. Even if it's just a smaller one, it's not going to be the same size, of the same magnitude of the 2-story tall Hylia statue, but there are like little shrines to the divinity throughout, and cash them in. You can either go health, stamina, we already covered that, and so jumping off Great Plateau.
Yeah. I wanted to like mention one more detail about like how well the tutorializing is done is like if you're at the top of the Temple of Time and you look out towards the mark that's been made on your map, you'll actually see there's a trail of literally like slalom flags pointing you through them.
Oh my goodness.
And saying like, go here.
Wow.
And
I'm just seeing this with
I'm trying to, for anybody watching, I'm trying to show it, but it's storming really bad in my game. But like, you also see the dueling peaks have that cut in them. He tells you, I think, does he mention through the dueling peaks?
I don't recall, but we'll get into the dueling peaks next time, because that is a great little landmark too.
It's really well done for any style of player. Because like, if you're somebody's like, give me the gosh darn game, let me do what I want. You can go wherever you want. But if you're a young person who's like, I'm so excited about this story and this adventure you're setting me on, it doesn't stop. Hold your hand. You get a mark on the map, and then all these environmental details showing you the path of least resistance to it. Yeah.
There's a lot more to get into with Breath of the Wild after you've left the Great Plateau. And it's really exciting to look through it in a more critical focus. And also just to be able to like gush over how well they accomplished these really impressive tasks, like to like take a medieval fantasy world and to introduce something like Sheikah technology that works so seamlessly into it, which doesn't feel like you're just trying to put your, I'm not just trying to put my peanut butter on chocolate. like I'm making a Reese's cup. Like they go together, right? Like they're not just two different things. That
But
are, like,
I'm not making a
notes.
factory processed Reese's cup. I'm like making a homemade like Buckeye bar.
Oh man, we are from Ohio. Okay, so as we continue through this, I hope campers that you'll join us. Check us out on Instagram at campvideogames.com. You can write to us, campvideogames@gmail.com. Let us know what you want to make sure we talk about in every region, because we've got plenty of them. And in those regions, there are all sorts of characters, all sorts of landmarks, and
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go.
items, essential items, bosses, enemies in general. Let us know what you're just most excited to discuss through Breath of the Wild, because Hylia knows I sure am excited.
Oh yeah, of the magnitudes of people watching my playthrough, the thousands and thousands of fans. Oh, they know. If we're talking characters, there's a character that has come up thematically in my playthrough, and I am obsessed with them.
I hope we're going to talk about Paya. I like her the most.
Oh, we'll meet them soon. We'll meet them soon.
Oh boy, the intrigue. I don't even know who you're talking about, so stay tuned, campers. This is just the beginning of a big adventure, and you're all invited.
All right, I need a juice box.
Oh boy.
Yeah, well, if you're playing along, Necluda, that's next
Yeah.
on Camp Video Games.
Camp Video Games.
Hit the stop thing.
If you'd like to write to us, send a message to campvideogames@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at campvideogames. If you want to become a real happy camper, you can support Camp Video Games on Patreon. For $5 a month, you'll be granted access to even more discussions about movie-based video games, game-based movies, full-length commentaries, playthroughs, and more. Whether you sign up or not, we're glad to have you here at Camp Video Games.